Consequential thinking, right, is about considering the likely outcomes of one's behavior before acting. It involves the assessment of the upsides and downsides of various courses of action. How can consequential thinking save our black boys from being victims of crime, violence, and the criminal justice system?
Well, I mean, just the act of like considering potential outcomes, probability, what's going to happen if I do this thing? What's going to happen if I don't do this thing? It doesn't mean that they'll necessarily, always do the right thing, because they're young, and impressionable and, they might be, a little hot headed and whatnot. But at least if they're considering like, yo, if I do this, then I might go to jail for the next 10 years. And then that leads to another question of, okay, do I want to be in jail for the next 10 years? And then when I'm in jail for the next 10 years, what am I going to be doing in jail for the next 10 years? And what am I not going to be able to do because I'm not at home with my people on my block, in my community and whatnot? A lot of times when those decisions are made that lead to those negative outcomes, that's not even a thought. That's not part of a thought process because there is no thought process.
Yeah. I wanted to say I actually learned consequential thinking through sports.
Mm-hmm.
And kids who aren't fortunate enough to play sports or do other activities, I think that it should be a key component of math lessons for
Yeah.
a demographic because, as you stated and you experienced, like people don't understand. People aren't really. They're not. The consequence is not even a thought in this person's head because they didn't learn. It's a skill. It's actually a skill to think about the consequences,
Right.
that they never learn.
And when you think about like, even in business, if you go to college and study business and you think about like cost benefit analysis, it's like you're constantly just thinking, okay, if I do this, then what are the potential outcomes? And then you can decide, okay, well, boom, this outcome is going to lead to the most profit if profit is my goal. So then, okay, well, I want this consequence. So I'm gonna go in this direction. One of the ways in which it connects to mathematics is through word problems. Because when you really get into word problems, whatever type of word problem it is, most word problems are generally set up like this. You're given some information about a scenario, could be anything. And then you're asked the question, well, if this is the case, then what would happen in this situation? Or what would happen if, if it's a distance, rate, time word problem, and somebody's driving a car at a certain speed, and when they drive at a certain speed, it takes this much time to get to this place. And then they say, well, what's going to happen if we increase the speed? Right? All word problems are just exercises in consequential thinking. So what I advocate for is like more word problems, for students to be exposed to more math, and specifically within math, more word problems, because that, again, it trains their brain into thinking consequentially, because you're constantly thinking, okay, well, if this happens, then what's going to happen as a result? And you're actually learning how to do calculations to figure out what the result's going to be.
And that reading comprehension, bro.
The reading comprehension is required too. And I think, and that's another important thing as well, because then we can expose also the fact that we need to be able to read in order to do math. So we can stop telling people this, like, or promoting this false dichotomy between being a reading person versus a math person. Because you can't be a quote unquote math person if you can't read and don't have a reading comprehension, because you won't be able to understand what you're being asked to do mathematically. Right. So that's another thing, and a lot of times too, on that topic, there's a lot of people have reading comprehension challenges that are masquerading as math challenges. Because I've had a lot of students that, boom, I give you the equation, right? 3x plus 5 equals 20.
They're good.
And you good. You can solve it. You know how to solve it. Boom, boom, boom.
Problem. Yeah, I know I go, yeah.
But if I give you the word problem that you have to read, comprehend, understand, decode, pull out the pertinent information, pull out the pertinent numbers, know how to set them up, set up the equation, 3x plus 5 equals 20, and then solve, you can't get to the 3x plus 5 equals 20, right? That's not as much of a math issue as it is a reading comprehension issue. So we got to address that. So we got to figure out how to combine, reading with mathematics and start to look at reading and mathematics as, commingling. We got to commingle those instead of like this, like divergence that we have, like reading. I'm a reading person. I'm gonna stay over here. I'm a math person. I'm gonna stay over here. It's like, nah, that's not reality.
I think too, man, we need to promote the skills in regards to survival.
Mm-hmm.
I think that conversation is not given to children enough in regards to like That's what I used to present it. Kind of put school to the side. We talk about surviving out here, and I think that needs to be the rhetoric that they hear. Like, you need these tools to survive out here. You need to know how to read. You need to know how to do basic math.
Yeah, yeah. And I think there's so much propaganda around like the futility and like the irrelevance of math, right? That people just buy into, right? Because as I said, like it's a political, like as Amos Wilson said, it's a political necessity that our children not excel in mathematics so that they won't be able to compete for job opportunities. So it's an economic necessity as well, right? So you buy into that, and then it's like you self disqualify yourself from even competing, right? Um,
And getting exposed too, man. Like,
yeah,
you need to know basic math, especially when you're out here doing the most basic transactions, understanding your loan agreement, understanding the profit you're supposed to get from basic stuff, because that's the basis of exploitation, your ignorance in math. You
yeah.
don't know what's going on, and you can't analyze and understand that you're being taken advantage of.
And the fact that it's so normalized, there's so many of us are being taken advantage of and not even knowing it. Like, and, I tell students all the time, like, somebody will take advantage of you with a handshake and a smile, and you won't even know it. And you'll sit there, shake their hand, smile back at them, like y'all cool. And they're robbing you. You just signed a contract where you're going to be robbed on a consistent basis because you didn't understand the mathematics that was involved. And it's like, a lot of times it's normalized, because so many people have math deficiencies. Almost, and we see it because a lot of people, they don't have as much shame involved with not being proficient at mathematics as they do with not knowing how to read the English language per se, right? Nobody would really admit, man, I don't know how to read. I don't really know how to read. But people like will easily admit, like, yo, I'm not good. I was never good at math. It's almost like people are trauma bonding. They like to find other people that's not getting this. You'll find it's easy to do. You'll find people that just weren't as good as math, but good at math. But I think that we got to really change. We got to change that, like how we regard mathematics. Like, mathematics is like treated like it's like an extracurricular activity, and it really shouldn't be. It's got to be treated like it's something that is like urgent and something that's really mandatory. So it's like if your child doesn't understand mathematics, your child is not proficient in mathematics, and your child doesn't know how to think mathematically and can't function in algebra, geometry and whatnot, there should be a cause for alarm. Like, we got to stop letting it slide. Like, oh, well, I just want them to pass and get a C. It's like, yeah, they might get a C, but they don't really know math. Or they might have took geometry in 10th grade and got a C. And you as a parent, you feel, okay, well, they didn't fail. They don't got to go to summer school. But it's like, they can't have an intelligent conversation with you about geometry, right? None of the theories, none of the postulates, they can't like solve a problem, and that's another thing too that people don't really realize. Like, with a class like geometry, in geometry, we kind of get caught up in like all the shapes and the angles and the circles and all that and the formulas. But really, geometry is about teaching people how to make a logical and valid argument, because if you think about a geometric proof, it's like, I'm going to give you some information, right? And then I'm going to ask you to prove this based on that information. So then you got to go through a sequence of steps to arrive at that conclusion. You can't just say, which is what a lot of people do, well, I just feel like this is like this, or I feel like that angle is equal to that angle. Like, so what? Like, this, in this particular situation, not to devalue feelings. Our feelings are important as human beings, but in this particular situation, it's facts over feelings. And you have to be able to provide facts that can substantiate your claim, right? And that's what geometry teaches you how to do. And it also teaches you, in terms of problem solving, how to go from a starting point and arrive at an ultimate solution to a problem where you may have to solve other smaller problems first. Because you may not be able to go to, okay, well, this angle, because of this angle is equal to that angle. Nah, first thing you got to do is you got to prove that this angle is equal to that angle, and this triangle is similar to this triangle. And then once you know that, you got to prove that this leg of this triangle is half of this leg of that triangle, and because of that, you got to figure out something else. Then you got to figure out something else. But that's how life is, right? With problems that we are approached with. Like, we may have a big problem, and then we say, okay, I got to solve this big problem. But before I can solve this big problem, I got to solve these little problems. And I got to be able to build up, but I got to do it in a systematic way, because if I don't do it in a correct and systematic way, I'm never going to get to the solution to the big problem. So that's another thing that geometry does, and other math courses do that too, but definitely geometry, because it's really just about problem solving. It's really just about teaching problem solving. But that's something that, I think about Kwame Ture and, Charles V. Hamilton, when they published Black Power back in 1968. I think about that book, and I think about, what powerful people do. Like, powerful people are able to identify problems and solve problems, right? And powerful people also have options, in terms of how to go about problem solving. So, and these are also skills we can pick up in math, because in math, there's a lot of options in terms of how to solve a particular problem, right? Whether it's in algebra, geometry, even with arithmetic, with the young people, like, there's so many different ways to multiply two numbers, so many different methods and all that. So another thing I want to impress upon parents watching this is that when the school might send home a homework assignment and the child is specifically asked to multiply using this certain method, but it's like, as a parent, you looking at it like, well, why can't they just do it this way? Like, this how I learned it 30 years ago. Why can't we just do this? This new math is dumb. I hate this stuff, right?